Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Swansea Bay City Region Joint Scrutiny Committee. It's the 2nd of February 2021. My name is Councillor Rob James and I'm the current chair of the committee. Just to make you aware that today's meeting is being recorded, can I please remind you to all switch off your phones on or put them onto silent for the duration of the meeting. In addition, can I refer you to the protocols for remote meetings which has been previously circulated, namely your microphone should be switched to mute unless you are speaking. Should you wish to ask a question or make a comment, could you please indicate either via the chat function or by raising your electronic hand via Teams. I will assume that you have all read the paperwork before us today prior to the meeting. Please only use the chat function to indicate if you wish to speak as an alternative to the electronic hand function or to raise any technical issues. When asking a question, can you please indicate which page number you are referring to? When speaking, please introduce yourself. Members who wish to speak in Welsh, please speak in Welsh first and then English. As you can see, the first item on the agenda is to do a roll call. So I will now call on Alison from Democratic Services from Neath, Talbot to take us through this. Alison.
Thank you, Chair. If I can go through the members first, if you can indicate if you're present. Councillor Rob James.
Yes.
Councillor Mike Harvey has given his apologies. Councillor Alan Llewellyn.
Hello, Alison. Yes, I'm present.
Councillor Darren Price.
I do present, yeah.
Councillor Giles Morgan.
Present, yeah.
Councillor Jan Curtis. Councillor James Adams. Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Mike Evans. Councillor Philip Downing.
Present.
Councillor Sharon Freegard.
Present.
Councillor Tony Barron.
Present.
I'll now move on to the officers' chair. Richard Arnold.
Present.
Jonathan Burns.
Aye, yeah.
Greg Jones.
Greg has sent his apologies, Alison.
That's great, thank you. Mike Shaw, I know, has given his apologies. Stacey Curran.
Present, Alison.
Thank you. And just to confirm, I'm Alison Thomas. Thank you. Thanks, back to you, Chair.
Great, thank you very much.
Apologies, Chair. Can I just ask if there's anyone else present who I haven't called out, please?
Yeah. Yeah, it's Sharon
Burford.
Sharon Burford, Carmarthenshire County Council.
And Steve Wilkes, Provost at Swansea University.
Phil Ryder, Portfolio Office Manager for the Swansea Bay City deal.
Thank you all for your attendance.
Thank you.
Jonathan, did you want to come in?
Chair, can I just send Wendy Walters' apologies as well, please?
Noted. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so we can move now on to the agenda and the business of the meeting. So first item or second item is Chair's announcements. Prior to today's meetings, members were circulated a document which provided the latest Swansea Bay City Deal programme and projects overview. I believe that was from Jonathan. Thank you very much for that. I think members found that very useful. The document is not intended for discussion at today's meeting, but will enable members to ensure that they're aware of the latest updates. Please ensure you take the time to read the document if you haven't done so already. With reference to agenda item number 6, members are disappointed that there was no written documentation has been received to accompany this item. Following from this, and in light of the fact that there is a local and not a regional project which falls outside the scope of this committee, members will defer this item to a future meeting with a written update. Finally, members are generally concerned about the lack of written updates being provided to this committee and stress their expectations moving forward that written updates are provided for each item presented on the agenda. This will ensure that the committee is fully able to carry out its functions. Okay, if we move on to declarations of interest, can I see any? None has been indicated. Agenda item number 4, minutes of the previous meeting, pages 3 to 6. So I'll take them one page at a time. Page 3, page 4, page 5, and page 6. Can I have someone to propose that they're a true reflection of the last meeting?
Move, Chair.
And a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
All in favour? Can I see you raise your electronic hand, please? There we are. And if you lower them, please. Any abstentions? And anyone against? No? Okay. There we are. Then we move on to the next agenda item, which was a verbal update from the Vice-Chancellor. The Vice-Chancellor has been unable to attend, so we do have a representative, though, from Swansea University. Can I thank you for your attendance, and I'd like you to introduce yourself and just give us that verbal update, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So for those of you who have not met me before, my name is Steve Wilkes. I'm the Provost at Swansea University. So I look after the academic side of the institution, including our major strategic projects. Before I begin to give you an update on the campuses projects, I just wanted to say a few words, if I may, about our involvement and full commitment to delivery of the City Deal portfolio. We're involved in quite a few projects at varying levels of degree of complexity. So, for example, the Pembroke Dock Marine project, we're involved from an R&D perspective, looking towards Neath Talbot. Then in the low carbon program there, we're working very closely in delivering a major R&D facility, which will look at decarbonisation of the steel industry. Also then, working closely with Sharon, who's here today, on the Pentrel project. Our involvement has shifted to what it was originally. The project, we're very much a partner aligned now to the delivery of the strategy, and looking at taking space within that building in order to help deliver that project. And also the digital regional projects, which are being led either by Carmarthenshire or Swansea. We are working collaboratively to see how we can get much more involved in those projects. So just an overall summary in terms of the portfolio of activity related to the university and the City Deal. But moving on more specifically to the campuses, the life science and wellbeing campuses project. So this project has a City Deal value in terms of the grant of around £15 million. What we're trying to deliver here in terms of outcomes are around 1,100 jobs, and adding 150 million to the GVA of the region by 2031. So in terms of the background and context of the project, the City Deal campuses proposal, it aims to exploit two clearly defined projects that are aligned to opportunities within Swansea. We're approaching this very much through a phased delivery. So phase 1 of the project will be funded through the City Deal, and it identifies support which is required to invest at both Morriston Hospital and the Scetty Lane site. So the idea being that phase 2 will then unlock, phase 1 will unlock phase 2. For example, being able to deliver the Arch project at the Morriston site, and also a new initiative at Scetty Lane to transform the region as the sporting capital of Wales, with sector-leading facilities for elite and performance athletes, but also those facilities to very much benefit the community. So phase 2 really will be dependent on scoping and agreeing a commercial engagement proposition that attracts public and private investment going forward. So focusing specifically on phase 1 of the project for the moment, in terms of its vision, it's really about adding value to the region in terms of life science, health, the sport ecosystem to support preventative interventions and innovations in healthcare and medicine. So in a nutshell, it's really about improving treatments and recovery to get people back home into their community environments at a much faster pace. So the project will deliver new research, trials, testing and sports facilities, a health campus that's enabled co-location of life science research and industry alongside clinical infrastructure, and that will provide then opportunities for future investments. So in terms of what we're planning to do, so it's about the first phase at Morriston is looking at refurbishing the management centre, and this really is about linking into digital health and platform technologies and clinical innovation directly at that site, working between the university and the clinical staff, and they're bridging into industry. In addition to that, at Morriston, part of the funding is looking at unlocking access to the Morriston site, and that then will enable the phase 2 activity to be developed there. Moving now towards the Scrutiny Lane site, we're looking at a life science, sports science and wellbeing technology centre. So all of these activities are done in partnership with Swansea City Council and Swansea Bay University Health Board. In terms of where we are with the development, we've submitted informally a draft of the outline business case to the Portfolio Management Office. We've received some very positive and helpful comments back from them, and we're working on those in order to sharpen up the outline business case. So from an innovation perspective, we're looking at creating accommodation on the Morriston site through the refurbishment of the management centre of around 700 square metres of office space for spin-in and spin-out activity. And also on the Scrutiny Lane site, we're looking at around 1,000 square metres of innovation space. So in terms of how we would interact with business and industry going forward as part of this project, so the university has a very strong track record in doing this. The Institute of Life Sciences is a classic example of that. But in order to provide much more reassurance in this space and to provide a pipeline of opportunities and activity, the project team have been liaising with the Health, Innovation and Business Development Director, and quite a bit of work has already been undertaken with Swansea University colleagues to identify potential partners and stakeholders and those who would want to move into those spaces. In addition to that, we're also working with, we've appointed a consultant to help us broaden the opportunities to identify more potential partners. And as I said, this has been done working hand in hand with Swansea Council and Swansea Bay University Health Board. So in terms of the opportunities, I think that the project will deliver for the region, that there are plenty of synergies, helpful synergies, I think, with the Pentra Owl project, and I'm sure Sharon will be saying a few more words about that in a moment. But thinking about the cycle of what we're trying to achieve here in healthcare, so this project is about having much more rapid recovery for those who have been in hospital or undergoing treatments, to get them back into the community. The Pentra Owl project is very much about how you can maintain people's health within the community. So in other words, to stop them then moving into a hospital environment. So there is a nice life cycle here that we can see across the region, which links these two projects in a very neat way. In terms of the innovation work that will be done, the work that we're looking at on the as part of the campuses project here is really about the low technology readiness. So this is about new technology, new drugs, etc., and trials moving forward then into the higher TRL levels at a much later date. That is very complementary with what is happening, I think, in the Pentra Owl project, which is about assisted living and wearable technologies, etc. So that's really about trialing those new technologies. So once again, we can see clear synergies, I think, across the region for both of those projects. So I've given you a little bit of a whirlwind tour of the project, what it's about and what we're trying to deliver. So I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Let me bring in some of the members to start off with. Councillor Jones.
Yeah. I'm glad there's not another Jones here, you know. Yeah, you mentioned collaboration. I must admit, I'm city councillor in Swansea anyway. I'm very grateful you've actually educated me. I wish I'd spoken to you actually sooner and so on. But with regards to collaboration in the project, you know, there's a box village part of the project. Now, I assume that's Trinity St. David's. So yes. What sort of interface have they actually got with you with regards to City Deal?
So that is a separate project, so I believe, which is being led by Trinity. Yeah. We're actually involved in that at the moment. Trinity are also part of the Pentrel project, and you know, we're all working collaboratively in that space. Yeah. So you know, we are working right across the region in terms of trying to help deliver successful projects here, but we are not working necessarily on every single one in that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll come back with something else. I've forgotten what I was going to say.
Okay. Jonathan?
Yeah, Chair, it was just worth me picking up with Councillor there. So the Box Village has been rebranded. It's now the Innovation Matrix, and it's a lot to do with the automotive stuff that Trinity are working on. So there will be synergies, but it is led by Trinity St. David specifically. But the wider waterfront project, which that's part of, I know that Steve and other colleagues for stuff around the Kingsway development and the arena, there's linkages for those as well. So there might be a further conversation to be had, Councillor, around that, further synergies. Broader for Swansea University.
Did you want to come back at that, Councillor Jones? Not at the moment. Okay. Councillor Llywelyn?
Yeah, diolch Cadeirydd. Gan i falle gofyn ychydig o gwestiynau, jyst am yn cael gwell dealltwriaeth o yr hyn mae'r Brifysgol yn ymwneud â'r fargen ddinesig. I don't know if you can sort of ask perhaps for a little bit further clarification of the how the university sees its role as part of the city deal. Obviously, it's been it's been quite a fraught time, I suppose, really, for the relationship between the university and the city deal over the past couple of years for reasons that we're all aware of. I have to say, it would have been helpful, similar to the chair's opening remarks, if we'd had a report on this in advance. Because I've got to be quite honest that I think that I'm grateful for the verbal update that you've given us today, but I think it's been a bit difficult for us as a committee to follow exactly where the university now sits with several of these projects, and I think it would be helpful for us to have, perhaps subsequent to the committee, so we, subsequent to today's meeting, so we're quite aware where exactly does the university fit into all of these projects. To what extent are you a partner? Are you a lead partner? Are you cooperating to a certain extent? Are you putting an investment into it? It's a little bit difficult to get the whole grasp of that. So perhaps you can elaborate a bit more about how key you see the university's role in these projects, and to what extent you're actually investing, either in terms of resources or financially or whatever, in the projects. And linked to that, how do you see the role of the university sector as a whole in economic development in Wales? There was a very interesting article over the weekend by Professor Dylan Jones-Evans of the University of South Wales. He was actually in the Western Mail, where he has a regular column where emphasise the importance of the university sector, but is Swansea University in a position to play that all Wales role as well as being part of our city region? And perhaps my final linked question, you'll be aware that some of the projects that the university was originally a partner in, particularly perhaps when a couple of the projects with my own authority, Neath, Talbot, was subsequently remodelled so that the university were not equal partners in them, and then obviously it reflects the circumstances at the time. But how do you see the university restoring its reputation as a dependable partner in either current or future projects?
Okay, thanks very much. Quite a few questions there. On the first part related to our involvement in the city deal, I think over the last 18 months we've used this as an opportunity to really refresh and enhance our activity, and we have reshaped one of the projects within the Neath Talbot low carbon scheme now, which is very much more aligned to the national and Welsh agenda in terms of decarbonisation, and particularly looking at decarbonisation of Tata as an example in the region. And similarly, our interaction, we've refreshed that completely in respect of the campuses project and also Pentra Owl. Coming back to our role, as I mentioned previously, in terms of the Pembroke Dock Marine project, we're very much a research collaborator. We're not leading that project. The campuses project, we are leading that project, as I said, working closely with Swansea City Council and the Health Board. And we are also actively leading, well, in a joint way with Neath Talbot, looking at the project related to decarbonisation. So I think our presence and our commitment to the city deal has been enhanced, and we are making sure that whatever we are committing to that, whether that is infrastructure, whether we're committing cash, whether we're committing our time, or whether it's our intellectual property, all of that has been factored in order to make sure that we are completely aligned to delivering the strategy associated with each of those projects. So in terms of the past is the past. We're very much about looking towards the future, and as I said, we've taken that time over the last 18 months to really refresh how we're engaging in the entire portfolio, and I'd like to think that we're engaging very proactively in that space. In terms of the roles of university in Wales, across the UK and across the world, I mean, they are so important to drive local economy, and that's something that the university's been fully committed to. When you think about the investment in the innovation campus on Fabian Way, we've worked right across Wales in partnership with other universities and businesses, particularly in the structural fund space, to add value to companies and businesses, and very much to the GVA in the areas. So our role is in taking things forward from an economic perspective is absolutely vital, and we have to do that very much in partnership, and we are truly committed to doing that. And I think, again, around the reputation, I think we have a very strong reputation in the space of collaborating across all sectors. Again, we've taken the opportunity to reset and refresh that, to make sure that we are truly working in partnership, so that there's mutual benefit for all of the stakeholders involved in each of our areas, whether that's within the city deal or outside of that. So I hope I've answered your question, and I've given you some reassurance there in terms of our commitment. But on top of that, I'm more than happy that we can share, a written update with the committee after the meeting today on our interaction with each of those projects, if that would be helpful.
Personally, I would find it helpful, Chair, if that would be something that colleagues would also appreciate.
Yeah, Diolch Cadeirydd. I'm sure we'll be able to facilitate that and ensure that is shared with all members. Jonathan, did you want to come in quickly?
Yeah, it's just a follow up on Councillor Llewellyn and to emphasise a few other bits around what Professor Welks just said. So there are other things that link in with City Deal, which we will work with all of our stakeholders across the region, the two universities in particular, to look at anything around skills development, anything around R&D type things. The most recent one that we had, and we're trying to link in our digital infrastructure project with this initiative, is a pan-Wales. It's called DNA. It's all about artificial intelligence and data, so all digital related. So we will utilise those type of initiatives to overlay on the infrastructure that we're creating for City Deal. So it's just to give you a bit of colour and flavour as to that's an example of things that we will continue to engage with the regional and if not pan-Wales stakeholders, Councillor. There are other examples as well, and maybe we should start making that more visible to this committee as well.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much for that. In terms of my questions, could I just probe a little bit on the position of the university regarding its finances? Obviously, coronavirus pandemic has had an impact on the university sector at large. Could you speak to what impact it's had on your student numbers and your finances?
So I think the pandemic has had a financial impact on most sectors. In terms of our student numbers, in fact, before this meeting, I was just chatting with the Vice Chancellor. Our applications for next year are up considerably. So, the brand of the university is still very strong. We didn't see a drop in home student numbers at all this year. Clearly, there's been a drop in overseas numbers, and there have been various support packages that have come from the Welsh and UK government there in order to help universities shore up that gap as we move forward. So the university is in a fair and strong position from its financial perspective. We've obviously had to make some changes and adjustments in order to stay within our reduced budget this year, and that may roll into next year as well. But we're feeling very confident about where we are at the moment, and also about the future from a financial perspective. Okay,
because I understand that, as you say, there has been a number of changes regarding the teaching staff, in particular. There has been, as a result of a reduced budget, as you state, and obviously it's a little bit concerning that may continue for another year. I would imagine with the situation, the ongoing pandemic and Brexit and such, that international students may still continue to be an issue in the next academic year. So do you see there being any financial restraints in your ability to play as much of a part as you would like to in the normal circumstances? Is it impacting at all in your ability to finance certain aspects of the deal that you would like to engage with?
So I think, as from a City Deal perspective, we're still fully committed and able to deliver our projects. Like every other business, we've probably had to cut our cloth appropriately in other areas, but that has not impacted in terms of the committed projects that we're looking at through the City Deal in particular. So there's no change or impact there.
Okay. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, you asked a couple of the points I was going through. You mentioned the campus. That actually, I think the European funding actually funded quite a large amount of the campus. Now we're actually out of the European Union, and you're actually talking about phase 2. I'm assuming phase 2 will be funded by yourselves. So is there going to be any impact with regards to, Morriston and Sketty Lane,
Sorry, the phase 2 that I was referring to is sort of the phase 2 past the city deal funding. So we're using phase 1 in order to do the refurbishment work up at Morriston in order to create this new facility on Sketty Lane. Phase 2 beyond that is about expanding the offering on Sketty Lane, and that's something that we're talking to some of your colleagues about and the leader. Also then, up at Morriston, there is a big project there, which has been planned, the Arch project, about expanding the hospital, innovation activities in that area. However, that is dependent on having a new access road into that area. That is part of the plan that we're looking at, is to scope that activity to try and unlock the second phases. Now, the second phases that we're talking about here potentially would require some of our own investment, but we're also looking for external investment as well, and funding opportunities. And again, that is something that we're having conversations with both the Health Board about, and also with your colleagues and Rob Stewart.
Okay, and you mentioned 1,100 jobs and so on. Those projects, they're actually going to generate 1,100 jobs, or?
Yes. Over the period of the project, yes, that's what we're anticipating.
Okay, and going back to students, how many students are actually in Swansea at the present time? Because there's a lot of development with regards to building flats in the centre of the city and so on. So how many students? You actually said the numbers were quite static or whatever earlier on. So how many students do we have in Swansea now?
Well, from Swansea University's perspective, we've probably got about 23,000 students. If you're talking about at the moment whether the students are actually resident in Swansea, some are, and obviously some aren't, because we've had to give guidance aligned to the recommendation from the Welsh Government and also the UK. The students should stay at home at the moment and not come back to their university towns and cities until there's more stability around the coronavirus. In terms of the developments that are taking place in the city centre, I mean, they are nothing to do with the university. They're private developments, and I can say from Swansea University's perspective, we've given absolutely no guarantees. We're not in partnership with any of those bodies about guaranteeing student numbers into the accommodation. So that's been very much from a private speculative perspective.
But they haven't, shall we say, built those flats. They must have some sort of idea with regards to what the student population requires and will want in the future. Have they spoken to you at all, or?
No.
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 Strange.
No.
Okay.
And if I could come back with a couple of questions. In terms of the projects that you see in the city deal, the 9, and what is a very turbulent time at the moment for society, do you feel that all the projects are suitable currently? Looking at the kind of impact in the retail sector right now and the hospitality sector, do you believe that all 9 projects are right? And should we be looking at other things to accompany them?
That's a very big question there. I think those that are reliant on sort of changes in technology or processes are always going to be relevant, because that's what's required for the future. For example, thinking about green economy. Also looking at projects which are focused on health and well-being. You can clearly see how that could be aligned to the situation that we're in at the moment, and therefore there could be greater need for that type of activity in the future. Those that are linked to retail, clearly that market is shifting and changing dramatically. Hospitality will probably reshape itself. We're always going to have hospitality when you think about it. And if we're thinking about cafes or within the city centre, etc., those types of things are always going to be needed. But again, that sector will get reshaped. So I think the projects are all still very relevant. Once we come out of the pandemic and things get a bit more stable in terms of more social gatherings, etc., I think we will see that they will really add value, I think, to what those projects are trying to deliver in terms of additional footfall and the like. So I really do think that the projects are all still valid in their current form.
Because I'm thinking specifically about Eregin. Obviously, UWTSD has taken a decision there where they want to create links to businesses and then help them with accommodations and such. Swansea University hasn't gone down that route. Now, we've noticed, as we can see in this meeting, there's a shift, a significant shift towards home working now and more remote working. Do you feel as if Swansea University were right to not look in this area? Or do you feel that there's still a need for projects such as that?
Well, no, I think there's a need for projects such as that. I think this comes down to the focus and from each institution. We're already part of the scoping work around the digital futures, which is being led by Carmarthenshire, our chief digital officer, and our academic lead in this area, having close conversations around what that could mean. Home working and is going to become more and more, I think, popular going forward. Flexibility, I think we're going to see a lot more need for flexibility around working. So, that IT infrastructure, and moving forward with, higher generations of technology is going to be absolutely critical to enable that. So, there are some projects already existing, I think, that are within the city deal, which will help in that space. In addition, thinking about the skills project, which is an underpinning project, cross-cutting in the city deal, there are real opportunities here, I think, to think about how that could be shaped by, what's going to be needed once we come out of the pandemic and how that aligns also to the city deal projects.
This is a matter of priorities, wouldn't you accept? Because obviously there's such a shape of a cake available and has been shared 9 times at the moment. One could argue that our investment into IT, into the digital infrastructure, may not take us to a level that we still need to be afterwards, because other regions are far ahead of us at the moment, and we probably only get into where they are currently whilst they are continuing to invest. So you don't see any need for future monies to be considering to kind of amplify what we're doing here, or any kind of reconsideration after the pandemic? Well,
I mean, IT is a rapidly changing sector. So what's working for us today in 3 years' time will be outdated. So I'm sure that is ingrained fully into the thinking and design of those city deal projects to make sure that they are fit for purpose. And in that space, it's very dynamic. And that's why I think they're looking at test beds and opportunities to see how they work. And then, you can build upon those then in order to roll those out, or to add new technology to that to make it more worthwhile for the community or whichever demographic you're trying to tap into there.
Thank you, Professor. Does any other members have anything to raise at this point? I don't see any. Rebecca, thank you very much for your attendance. It's very good to have a Swansea University representative here, and we'll look forward to you coming to future meetings as well.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. Been very happy to answer your questions, and any further information that you require from us, we'd be more than happy to provide that. I hope you don't mind, but I do have to leave now to go to another meeting. So, but very nice to see you all. Thank you very much.
There has been a request for a formal kind of a response to Councillor Llewellyn, so I'm sure that will be facilitated. But yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, so if we can move on to item number 7. We're not going to take item number 6, as I said in my chair's announcements. So item number 7, a verbal update on the Swansea Bay City Deal funding. I believe this is going to be Chris Moore.
Sorry, Rob. Yes, perhaps ask Richard to come in there to support me here. I thought we were doing the Pentrowel one.
No, I think members felt that they needed a written document to be able to scrutinise before receiving a update on that particular project.
All right, because Sharon had a PowerPoint. I don't know whether you were aware that she was going to run through in terms of the progress and where it is.
I think what we'll do is we'll push it on to the next meeting where we can get documentation in advance of the meeting if possible.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Can I ask Richard to come in there, Richard?
Yeah,
because I think you were prepared for this item, hadn't you?
Yes. First of all, my apologies for you not having written documentation. We just felt last week it was a little bit premature. And if what we can do is we can come back when we're in a more solid place and we can provide a structured update to you all. At present, the situation in respect of funding is that we received a funding award letter in respect of the second tranche of funding, which is to the tune of 18 million. Within that award letter, there was also an opportunity to draw down a further 18 million subject to meeting the AOR recommendations. John will touch upon the AOR recommendations in a short while during his update, but that we submitted them to joint committee, the terms and conditions, and it was approved by joint committee. However, it was subject to approval by the 4 independent authorities. So we now obtained approval by the 4 independent authorities, and this week have returned the acceptance to Welsh Government, who have informed us that we will receive the second tranche of funding at some point this month.
Okay.
I think, Chair, in addition to that, there is an indication that there will be a third payment before the end of the financial year. That third payment will be representative of the cash that was due for 2021, because we've still been playing a bit of catch up on this, because the claim that we put in this week was for 1920, and there's another instalment before the end of the year. So if those all come through by the end of the year, which is Welsh Government's ambition, we will be up to date then in terms of the payments. The terms and conditions, as Richard mentioned, were part of the Joint Committee report and were part of the public document. So whilst they may not have been circulated with members, they are open out there, and there were some differences, but mainly around the accounting officer's review report going back. So now that everything's accepted, that's moving that forward.
That's great. Thank you both. Councillor Downing, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So what you're saying is on the report, on the second instalment, everything has been, as it were, signed, sealed and delivered. So there will be the second tranche on the 28th of February. On the first tranche, has any of that money been allocated to any scheme? And it's nice to hear that there's a third tranche coming, which would then give us a total of around 54 million. So where will that money stand, and how long will it stand in somebody's bank account?
Okay, no money has actually been distributed to the actual individual schemes yet, because in conjunction with claiming the money from Welsh Government, and we had the 18 million quite a while ago, we have been going through agreeing funding agreements with the project lead authority and the delivery bodies in some cases. So the first 18 million was actually approved on the back of the Swansea waterfront and the PDM. No, was it PDM? No, Eregion project.
Correct.
So those were the only two that we could have funded, but there was a funding agreement which went through joint committee about the meeting before last, which was approved in respect of the project lead authority down to, the accountable body down to the project lead. Those have been going through legal review and they are near completion at the moment and imminently going to be signed off. There are a couple of amendments that have now been discussed. It's been quite a significant test in terms of making sure that the draft legal documents were documents that were fit for purpose, and they will be implemented on all the projects in respect of the one from the accountable body down to the project lead. There was a template then that was agreed for the project lead down to the delivery arm, if there was a delivery arm, and not all projects had the delivery arm. That has really been tested on the PDM project in Pembrokeshire, and we're at a point where that will get signed off very soon. So we can't actually release any money until the funding agreement is in place, because that's the backbone behind the information, and we're basically within weeks of signing those off. I would have thought probably Reagan is about a fortnight or so off signing, and the waterfront is not that far behind. But the waterfront, I believe, and Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that has got to be signed off by City and County of Swansea before they can approve the sign off the funding agreement before we can release any funds. As regards the funds, at the moment we've only got the first 18 million. The second 18 million is due, and I think the date you're picking up won't be guaranteed because we've had a bit of a delay in terms of claiming it, because we had to go through due process our end, and literally the offer letter came out just before Christmas. But it will be in, I would have thought, sometime later this month is what they're anticipating. The money is held in Carmarthenshire bank account, and there has already been a report gone through joint committee quite a while ago in respect of any money held in terms of how we account for it, and we're accounting for it where there is interest accrued on any money held, and that interest accrued is then being distributed on a formula basis, and I can't remember the detail of it, but it's on a formula basis around the four constituent authorities. So no authority is losing out as a consequence of the money being held in Carmarthenshire's bank account, because we're putting it on the market.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Two reasons I've asked. First of all, is that I know Jeff as well. We were looking at the City and County of Swansea budget plans, and we couldn't find anything there from City Deal. So that prompted one of the questions. The other one is that on the report on the funding, it does say that any unclaimed part of the funding will cease to be available after the 28th of February. So I was just wondering about the risk in that. Is there any risk, or is everything like
no?
Everything
there isn't any risk. We've been in constant dialogue with Welsh Government officers, and they're quite content with the position. So there's no risk with the funding at all. As regards where you're looking for the money in City and County of Swansea, I've been in quite close contact with Ben in Swansea, the Section 151, and we'll push the money through as soon as we can, but we got to get these funding agreements in place, and it will. I'm hoping that if the third instalment is dropped down by the end of the year, we should be able to get 3 years worth out then to City and County of Swansea, and any interest that's accrued will be apportioned accordingly through that process.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Yes, I know Phil and I from the same authority. I think similar question I was going to ask. It's really good news that we're actually having the money at last. It's been in the press so many times that, we've had 18 million, and I think it was confirmed in the same meeting as Phil that, no monies has come through at all. With regards to the future, do we expect any further hold-ups, or is there a clear line now that they actually reduce, subject to the projects being completed? Is it a clear line that they will actually get their portion of this 18 million? over the next 15 years?
Once the project's once the project's been approved, and secondly, then once the funding agreement's in place, which is the position really with Swansea at the moment, is getting that funding agreement in place. And I'm pretty sure that Tracy in Swansea said that she's taking it to Cabinet in the next couple of weeks to get approval. Once that has been approved, we will be able to release the money, and then there'll be an automatic release on a annual basis of the cash over the 15-year period. That is obviously subject to Welsh Government releasing their proportion of it, but I don't anticipate any problems because we've been through 2 lots of terms and conditions over the last couple of years, and my belief is that any further terms and conditions are just going to be a grant application and a sign off getting easier. So I don't anticipate any difficulty with the flow of cash coming through in the future years. What is actually worth acknowledging is actually that what seems to be flowing through at the moment, which is the 18 million, is proportionally slightly higher than what the original 241 million divided by 15 years was. So, and that we will be proportionally putting through as well.
Yeah, I must admit, I worked that out as well. I was going to ask the question with regards to, why are they releasing 18 million, which is a larger proportion, shall we say, over the 15 years? Do we know why that is? Or
I think it's just the profile of Welsh Government money and the funds that they've got available. Initially, the first year, they had further money available that they could put into the city deal, so they chose to load it towards the front. It was certainly something that we, as a city deal, were lobbying for, because all our costs are loaded up front in the first 5 to 6 years. So they're trying to support it with the capacity they got. But what they can't do at the moment is they can't guarantee that profile will continue for the whole of the 15 years, but we are running into year 3 where it's been indicative. So I live in hope that it will continue, because it does ease some of the pressures more locally in terms of getting the cash up front.
Yeah, on this 241 million, I think there were 11 projects starting, and now it's gone down to 9. So I'm assuming that 241 will actually come down. The less projects, the less money. I don't mean, for
no, the 241 is still saying the same, and we've got within a lot of the agreements and the funding terms that we can reuse that money. At the moment, the money is going to, and John would explain this in a little bit more detail, is still going to the not reprofile, but amended schemes, where schemes have changed within those local authorities. So at the moment, where you had a approved scheme in Swansea, same as Carmarthenshire had an approved scheme, that profile hasn't changed. The biggest change is with Neath and Talbot in terms of some of their schemes, but there's been no pullback in money. There's been a readjustment of schemes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Cynghorydd Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. Well, firstly, it is great to see that the money is starting to filter through. I may sound like a broken record, but at the last meeting, I did ask Jonathan, at the start of the project, it was 1.3 billion over 15 years, creating 9,000 jobs, and with a GVA of 1.8 billion. We were subsequently told then last October that GVA has been reviewed, and it's now 2.1 billion projected to be, with 9,600 jobs. Obviously, the number of projects at the start was 11, and we're down to 9, and I appreciate that's always going to be a bit fluid. My question is, now the money's starting to flow through, are we happy that those notional figures really still stand, and the number of jobs stands at 9,600, and the GVA of 2.1 billion is still what's projected?
Chair, if you don't mind, because I've actually got a slide on that, Councillor, and I'll update that in the programme update. There's not a straightforward 2-second answer, so if I put the visual up on the table and I can talk you through, because they're all estimates, these are outlined business cases, some have gone through to procurement to full business case, so I'll run through that if that's okay, Chair.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Morgan?
Yes, I was wondering which section to put it in, but I see it
it's in the...
Yeah, no, that's fine, thank you.
I think just going back more generally on that point, that has certainly been something that we've been conscious of in putting these funding agreements in place, and the funding agreements have actually, there has been some sort of back and forth with the targets, because each project gave a contribution of GVA and jobs and everything else of that, and those outputs are critical to the overall picture. So we've been very conscious of getting the funding agreements to actually have an element of accountability to the individual projects, so that wasn't missed over the 15-year period. So whilst John will talk about the holistic position at the moment, that has been a challenge, and you know, is a conversation that we're having as we're signing each funding agreement off, to make sure that those individual project leads are responsible for whatever they put in the business plan originally, unless there's been a change which Welsh Government's agreed to.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you, Chris.
Two quick questions for myself, and then it'll be Councillor Llewellyn. Chris, in terms of the terms and conditions, is there still the clawback mechanism still in place? If targets not met, then they're able to claw back an element of it. And the second thing is, in regards to no funding being released to the individual projects, we were aware that there was one partner, a university partner, that was in financial difficulties and was hoping for the money maybe even a year ago. So could you speak to whether that you've had conversations with the finance officer of that university, and how were they managing that kind of lack of cash flow from the 18 million?
Okay. Yes, the clawback arrangements are still in place. They are in place on a portfolio or project as a whole. I would emphasize that they are at last resort, and again, this is something that Welsh Government have significant dialogue has taken place with Welsh Government to get that assurance in writing as far as possible that every other avenue will be looked at before any money is clawed back, and acceptance of changing circumstances, changing profile. Let's be honest, if we were talking about this a year ago, we wouldn't have expected COVID to actually cause some sort of problems in terms of delivery. So whilst it is actually a concern, because it is part of the concerns, there is a lot of processes and mitigation to go in before they physically claw any money back as Welsh Government. As far as the university that was being challenged by the fact that they were waiting for the money, Carmarthenshire in its treasury management function put a loan in place to support Trinity St David, so that actually the exposure of the money that was waited from the city deal wasn't causing them a problem, and that was put in place quite a long time ago, and that's why they've been able to manage without any problem. That was a decision not part of the city deal. It was a decision that Carmarthenshire, as the project lead authority, chose and was able to put in place to assist them on a cash flow basis, and that will be repaid either on a 12-month after the event, or else when the funding is put in place, and is anticipated as when the funding will be put in place.
And on that cash flow issue, I think next month is 4 years, is it not, when we signed the city deal initially? And as you said, is around about, we come up to year 3 now of the portfolio projects. We were always working on the assumption there would be a 5-year kind of spend period before we start recouping. Do you believe that that's been knocked on now, and it's actually going to be longer than 5 years? Because there's still a number of business cases it's still in production, some of the business cases, but even if we expect them to be signed off in the next year, so many things have been knocked on, as we know. Do you think there's going to be that spend is going to extend into 6, 7, maybe 8?
Inevitably, you know, the only project that is significantly ahead in terms of the physical construction is the waterfront, and the only two, waterfront and Eregin. Eregin's got phase 2, but if you look at Pentre Owl as an example, we are waiting for the business plan a case to be signed off. That is due to be signed off very soon, but then we will have a tender process to go through, etc. And there will be a lead-in time in terms of construction, which will roll on a minimum 2 or 3 years. So I do anticipate certainly, and it's probably from when the project or program management office was set up, that actually probably our 5-year period is more running along those sort of lines, and that is needed for the delivery, and that will happen. So in a way, from a cash flow point of view, because the cash flow started in 18-19, that is helpful, because all projects will be that much more advanced. If we started spending in 18-19 as was hoped, we would be in a situation where each of the authorities, because of the funding mechanism, would have had to borrow more. But if you imagine Pentre Owl as an example, and perhaps I shouldn't use that one as an example all the time, but it's easy. We're now, by the time we get approval of the business plan, there will be 3 years worth of cash instalments already in the bank with the accountable body that will actually be then passed over once the funding agreement's in place to Carmarthenshire, which means then the Carmarthenshire will only have to be borrowing then for the 12-year, well, it'll be even less than the 12-year period, because some of the first 3 payments have been slightly more upfront loaded.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to try and make. I think it's going to help you as 151 officers across the 4 authorities, because even though we're not getting the benefits from the assets and the programs straight away, in terms of cash flow, I would imagine it substantially helps all the authorities. Councillor Llewellyn, sorry for taking up the time.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Dim ond cwestiwn, Bill. I want to say very briefly, Chris mentioned that some of the Neath for Talbot schemes have had to be remodeled and reprofiled, and that's got obviously an impact on the financial profile. I do have a question on one of the Neath for Talbot schemes, but I think it'll probably be more appropriate if I raise it under the next item, under the update. But I do realise that there is a tie-in to the financial profile.
Chris, will you be around for the next part if it does have to go into the finance?
I wasn't intending staying because I've dropped out of another meeting, but I can either take it now or Richard will be able to answer it.
I'll be there if you want to direct it.
Yeah, it's primarily about sort of operational progress rather than financial progress, but I'm just recognising that there's a tie-in to the spend profile then.
I'm sure if it's acceptable to the committee, Richard will handle it if I've dropped out.
That's okay. Yeah. Councillor Morgan, did you want to come back in, or was that a legacy hand?
Apologies, I'll lower the hand.
Yeah, thank you. No other questions? Does any members have any other questions on this item? No, thank you very much, Chris.
Okay, thank you. If you don't mind, Chair, I'll drop out.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
Ta-ra, all the best.
So if we move on to agenda item number 8, so this is the programme monitoring, so it's pages 7 to 92. Jonathan, I understand you're going to lead on this.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got a series of slides, but you'll notice because the volume of stuff that now is being generated, so you've got lots of things around quarterly performance, IAP, Integrated Assurance Approval Plan, Risk Register, COVID Impact Assessment. We got things around action plans and accounting officer review. So you've got a whole wealth of information that you may not have had previously. So I'll run through some of the key aspects of that. And I'll touch on some of the points that have been raised, particularly Councillor Morgan's query around the portfolio and the estimates associated with that. So if I'll go into my presentation mode now, Chair. So I might not see hands being put up. So if you want to interrupt me or whatever going through, or wait till the end, that's absolutely fine. Okay. So hopefully you can see my slides. Chair, just to make sure, can you see my slides okay?
Yes, all good from here.
Yeah, I can.
Great.
If anyone's got any issues, please put in the chat function.
Yeah, and I'll pause in between each kind of section if you like. So if anybody has any questions, but please interrupt me because I can't see anybody raising their hand. So this is a city deal update. This coincides nicely with our quarterly updates. So you've got, as I said, a wealth of information. One of the key things, we've now updated our map, if you like, of the 9 projects. I know a few people have referenced 11. So this is now the map of the 9 projects, and I'll go through each of those and provide an activity update as to where we are in a status. But before I go into each one, I'll just cover some of the broader portfolio. So in terms of the 9 projects, where are they? So there's 3 in delivery. There's 3 awaiting ministerial approval. There's 1 which has been regionally approved and has been submitted or will be submitted for ministerial approval within the next week or 2, and 2 are in development. I'll just run through each of those so that you've got a feel for them. So delivery are the Waterfront, Eregan and Pembroke Dock Marine. Awaiting ministerial approval are Homes as Power Stations, Digital and Pentra Owl. The one that's been regionally approved and will be submitted within the next week or so, or probably 2 weeks, is Support and Innovation Low Carbon Growth. And then the final 2, which are in development, are Skills and Campuses. The only other thing I put in development is Eregan phase 1 is operational, that's live, but phase 2 is in development. So they're scoping what phase 2 will look like and doing some analysis on that. And I'll touch on that in a little bit. So that's where we are with our 9 projects. So everything is moving in the right direction and moving into delivery, which is what we all want. In terms of the overview, where are we? So we now have a portfolio business case. I've mentioned this in October. That went through various scrutiny, so with Welsh UK government. And this coincided with all the stuff that we had on funding award conditions. And I think I reported it back in October. We have now completed all the award funding conditions. There were 11 with a subset from the Actica review, which had 7 of them. A lot of these were largely down to governance assurance type stuff, but other things as well, project specific things. So all of those are now done. We've had confirmation from Welsh UK government for that. As part of that process, we did a stage gate review. So we had an external team come in, interview all of our stakeholders, Welsh UK government, etc. And we had a series of recommendations, and we have pretty much implemented all of those recommendations now. So we're making good progress across the board. And then the accounting officer review, I referenced it just a little bit earlier. And the stuff that Chris and Rich has talked about in terms of funding release is based around this accounting officer review. So I think we had 9 people from Welsh and UK government critique our portfolio business case. They came back then with a whole host of comments. There was 143 of them. We responded as a PMO to those and the projects. And that has now led to 15 recommendations. And we have a plan, a forward work plan, to incorporate those 15 recommendations into our work program and into our portfolio business case. And I'll touch on quite a few of those of what we've been doing. But there are things like making sure that there's strategic policy alignment across all projects and programs, that our spending objectives are defined and that they're baselined. And we kind of touched on that just now. Our baseline is 2017. That's when the heads of terms were signed. Things around procurement principles, community benefits, making sure that they're captured through the procurement process. Things around risk management strategy, that's developed and agreed. Change control process, we've developed and drafted one that is going through governance process now as we speak. And then things around how we monitor and measure on performance. And again, part of that is through the highlight reports that you've seen previously, the quarterly reports, and we will be looking at an annual performance report as well. So all of these things are gaining momentum. They're starting to mature, if you like, from a portfolio perspective. So as I said, it's moving in the right direction from my perspective. I'll pause there just in case I can't see any hands. So Chair or any member, would you like to ask any questions so far?
Are there any points that you want to raise at this stage? Councillor Llywelyn. You're on mute.
Sorry, my question is actually on a specific project. So do you want me to hold back until we...
If you don't mind, Councillor, I think you mentioned one of the Neath for Talbot. I'll go through each of the 9. I'll just give a summarise, and then maybe you can just ask at that point.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, there we go.
Whatever's best. Thanks.
Philip.
Okay. So sorry.
Aware that you're not in the slideshow view. So if you could just go to the slideshow view just to make it full screen.
Yeah, it's fine. When I go into slideshow view, it throws me into a different. Yeah, thanks, Phil. I kind of saw that. Okay.
Okay.
So this is one of the questions that we had earlier on. So I've shared this with you previously, and this is our current state of play. This will be updated in our next iteration of our portfolio business case, which will only be in a month or so's time. We will submit by the end of March. But this basically shows all of the projects, the 9 of them, the investment and where the money comes from. This is as a planned investment. So the £240 million question that was asked to Chris based on, we have 240 million from City Deal. We currently have allocated 235.7 to those 9 projects. So there is 4.3 million, which is currently unallocated. Okay, so, but we haven't finalized all our business cases, so that is subject to change based on the finalization of the effectively remaining 2 business cases. But the other parts of the investment then, our current estimates for public is 343 million, private 578. That sum, that 1.157 billion, is our current estimate of what we currently know at an outline business case. So these are estimates. I want to stress that our headline figure was higher. It's 1.3 billion, but we're within 10%. And I think I explained this in the last meeting. And what we've learned, if you like, from a City Deal is that we need a range. So when we said this and signed it in 2017, we had an estimate, which was 1.3 billion. It was 9,000 jobs created. It was 1.8 billion GVA. So that's the kind of minimum, if you like, of what we need to do. And as we go through the development of our portfolio business case and maturity of it, overcoming some assumptions and any risks and all those different things, we will start honing in on exactly what this will deliver as a portfolio. So our investment is down on what we originally said. GVA and jobs created have gone up. So our estimates of those, GVA is currently up by about 30% or 32%, jobs created around about 3%, and those have increased. So I think I said this before, we're effectively doing more with less on our current estimates. So hopefully that might answer some of the questions that were raised earlier on. And this is work in progress. Our portfolio isn't finalized. We still have to get 2 more business cases over the line and do the economic appraisals based on those and the financial appraisals on those as well. Okay, so I'll pause there, Chair, just to make sure that I've answered the question.
Okay, at this stage.
Okay.
Yeah, I got something just really on that figure. Where it's actually broken down, you know, I can see the top one, Swansea City and Waterfront Digital District. I can see City Deal 50 million. I mentioned the Box Village earlier, which is being built by Trinity St David's.
Yeah.
The actual local authority contribute or getting from the City Deal is 36 million, and 14 million is for the Trinity St David. And I really thought that the oh, sorry, I can see it now, 175 million.
Yeah.
Why is that not broken down, you know, with regards to, I'm assuming the Box Village on the waterfront are actually classed as one project then?
It is. And if you took the components within these 9 initiatives, it could be programs or projects, there's about 22 of them. So 3 within waterfront, there would be 4 within PDM, there, etc. So that there are a number of things within them. We have, and Rich, from the financial perspective and from our reporting, we will start breaking them down into those 20 odd components.
Yeah.
We need visibility of those as well because they progress at different stages.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, you've got a mixture here of some little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Yeah, and generally, if you take waterfront as an example, the arena has been built to a point, whereas some of the others haven't even gone through the planning consent type activity. So each entity at each one of these 9 will be at different stages within them. So and take Neath Talbot as an example for supporting innovation, low carbon growth. There are 7 projects within a programme.
Yeah.
So it is important, Councillor, as you said.
Have you got a slide, you know, with these different components allocated to, shall we say, Swansea City Council, Trinity St David's, and so on?
We do, but I haven't got a slide on me now, but it's in our portfolio business case.
Right.
But I can bring that, we can share it after this meeting, and we can provide all of those components, all the projects within the programs, and we can share those immediately. And you can see the status of where we are with them.
Yes, I think
if you waited a month, you can have all of that updated with the current state of play. So I would encourage them in a month's time or so.
Right.
Okay. That would be good timing.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jonathan, for these slides. What I'd say is, well, first of all, can we have a copy of this after the meeting as well? Would it be possible to send this round? Because
absolutely, yeah.
Particularly this slide, for me, everybody's asking pertinent questions, but I've always got my eye on what these provisional figures are, because in 15 years' time,
yeah,
I hope that we get to where we say we are, because there'd be nothing worse than not achieving it. But as you said at the start of your piece, we seem to be doing a lot more with less, and I hope that plays out. But my only sort of rider question would be, obviously Regin has started, they've done their phase 1. When would we likely get tangible figures? I know GVA takes time, but as a scrutineer, I don't want to keep on being told that at some stage there must be something tangible that can be sent back to us, even if it's the number of jobs created. It's saying 427 there. Where are they now?
You've touched upon something that is a kind of burning desire for me, and I probably should have, Chair, introduced one of my colleagues. You've met Richard Arnold, Finance Manager, but Phil Ryder is also on the call, and Phil is the PMO Manager, so Phil is my deputy in effect. And what we're going to focus on, and you'll see this coming through the quarterly reports, is the output deliverables. So it's not currently in there. You've spotted a kind of a mission, if you like, from our quarterly reports and the annual reports, and that would be output deliverables. So the ones that we have for things like Waterfront and Oregon in particular, we actually know what those are. We just need to create the templates and the mechanism to report those to you. So I can tell you in Oregon phase 1, 100 jobs have been created. That a certain amount of companies, a certain amount of floor space has been occupied, a certain amount of local contractors were contracted to build. All of those things, we have them. We just need to standardize them for City Deal and then start putting those through the quarterly reports. So that is a spoiler alert in effect, but you will get those on the next quarter, and that will also be fed into our portfolio business case. And that's what Phil is currently working on as a priority, to get those up and running and reported.
Okay.
So on that item, Jonathan, sorry, did you want to come back in, Councillor Morgan?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, well, that's great. I mean, to start seeing some tangibles would be fantastic. And from my point of view, the spreadsheet that we're seeing in front of us is great, and all I'd want to see is a few more columns added on to that.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what I would like to see as well. So that's what we'll start doing, is showing the stuff that will come behind that is the good news stories and case studies and all those different things, but it's the numbers. So every project or program business case will have output deliverables, and they will have outcome and impact. So impact is effectively what's on here with the investment that we put in. We're missing the bit in between to show how we're getting towards that impact. So that will, as I said, that will come.
Great, thank you. I look forward to the next meeting.
Yeah, me too. No pressure, Phil.
On that, Jonathan, I think it is important that we have that information. Like Councillor Morgan just stated, obviously Oregon's been up for a while now. Waterfront is making a lot of progress. So we'd definitely like to see outputs in terms of how many jobs are created. But I think we'd also like to see a bit more information on the types of jobs that's created, and also whether it's going to local people or not. And I guess a similar point will be on tendering as well. How many local companies are actually getting access to these contracts? So, Phil, it seems like you want to jump in.
Yeah, and apologies, John, if you do touch upon it later on. It was just to add about the annual performance report, which again is where a lot of the not the good news stories, but a lot of the achievements over the last 12 months will be reported, and the aim is that I'll have that initial draft of that by the end of the financial year. So it's just to add that there is that document being prepared as well in the background, which will cover a lot of these quantifiable benefits off as and when they're realised.
Yeah, no, that's an important point. So thanks, Phil. This will be a common theme, I think, going forward, because as more projects become get into delivery and procurement and all those different things, and the operation of, that's what we need to start showing the worth. What is the spend actually achieved? So that's important. The bits that I'll cover now. So affordability. So the whole point of the portfolio business case is to make sure it's affordable, that we can achieve what we set out to do within the envelope of money that we have. The city deal, as we've said, is ring fenced. It's static at 240 million. The other two, the public sector and the private sector, are flexible. So we want to maximise what those are. We want to make sure it's aligned to the project, but there could be opportunities and risks associated with the delivery of these projects. And a lot of the stuff that Rich has now put in place for quarterly monitoring will make sure that we highlight the affordability and the ongoing viability of these projects, and that we have any intervention at the earliest point if there is anything going astray. So for argument's sake, if the cost of steel goes up, we should have early intervention sight of that to figure out what would happen. Do we need more money? Do we need to reduce the scope of what we're building, etc.? So all that would be captured as part of the risk management process, but also as part of the affordability plans that we're putting forward and the monitoring of those. And those, as I think Rich might have indicated, those will be going to Welsh Government. We've agreed the kind of format of what those will look like, and they also will form part of the quarterly monitoring going forward. So again, you can scrutinise based around some of those, and you'd have the information to hand. Okay.
Sorry, can I just ask a question? You've got affordability here and so on. Are you going to break each project down to affordability, or are you talking about the whole city deal scheme?
Each project, the 9 entities, will have their own business cases, and they all will have basically an affordability plan, a financial monitoring for each of those 9, and they will be broken down to the component parts. We've had that requested from Welsh Government. Rich, I can't remember if we called it 3rd or 4th tier, but it goes down to that 20-odd list of projects within the programme portfolio.
Yeah, if I can come in there, John. Essentially, it goes down to a 4th tier. So all Welsh Government want us to monitor on is essentially they're concerned with how much investment is going into the region to linked to their 241 million grant. So what we do is we monitor on investment, and we go down to, we go down to a 4th level. Some projects already have that to hand. Others, it's a work in progress at the moment. But hopefully, when all 9 are up, it'll be a consistent approach down to component level. So essentially, it will go, the slide prior to this, what you've seen is a high level view. You will have programs behind it, and then within the programs, you'll have the projects, and we'll be reporting on the projects at project level and the investment components that make up them projects.
Thanks, Rich. Okay, so the next slide is around governance and assurance and reporting. So a lot of the things that you now in receipt of is part of that process. There is more. Some of it's behind the scenes, but it informs these reports. So this is just a diagram of our current governance arrangements for the city deal. But one of the key things that we need to start promoting more, and we're in a good place to do it now, is communications. So both internal and external communications are important, and by internal I mean region communications, and then the external communications, it could be newsletters, it could be online tooling like Twitter or Facebook. Website, we're going through a revamp of our website currently. E-marketing brochure, we're going to look at developing that. LinkedIn, amongst a whole host of other things like PR. And what we're finding, so Greg Jones is our PR marketing person. He's doing really good work, and he's starting to build momentum in that. So we recently put through a comms plan through our governance. That was well received, making sure that we got the key messages, what routes we're going to take to communicate, our stakeholders and how we engage with those, etc. So all that's taken shape. But a lot of it then is focused on portfolio, program, project management, both principles and practices. So risk management, the integrated assurance approval plan, which I'll cover in a second. Risk management. So we now have a risk management strategy. We have standardized templates for risk, etc. We have a process for change control. So if a project wants to change something, we now have a process. It's in draft. It has to go through an approval process, but we will have that process in place so that we've got an escalation point where most change will happen locally at a project level within local authority or university or health board. And then we have a route. If there was something significant that impacted on our investment objectives for the portfolio, that would then be taken to Welsh and UK government for their sanction, but through a process of what we have. And Chair, maybe we can bring that to this group to raise awareness of that in a future meeting. It's still it's a draft at the moment, but we're happy to share that. Other things then, we've done lots of things around monitoring and evaluation. We kind of touched on it for the outputs, but it's also the outcomes and impact. And Phil talked about this annual report. So that will look at the last 12 months of what we've achieved, where we are now and the status, and what we plan to do for the next 12 months. And again, from a scrutiny perspective, that will probably inform your future work plan as to how and what you would look to scrutinise. And we can only plan a certain far in advance, and on certain things will crop up in between. But broadly, we have a direction of travel. The other couple of bits, one is around gateway reviews. I think I'm now, since being in post, I've probably been part of 7 or 8 gateway reviews. So these are the external teams coming in, scrutinising, testing, challenging our business cases, make sure that they're robust, they're fit for purpose, that they're deliverable. And we've done that to good effect. I believe that we have made our business cases far more robust by doing this process. The feedback we're having from Welsh UK government is very positive, and that will hopefully now start releasing some more business cases to be approved in coming weeks. So that's the hope. And I mentioned about the accounting officer review. You know, that's part of it. That informs our kind of governance assurance and reporting arrangements. So as I said at the start, that's all moving in the right direction. All of that stuff couldn't be done if I didn't have my team in place. So you got Rich and Phil on the call today, but there's 8 of us now in the portfolio office. The team for me is not just these 8 people. The team is all the project leads and their team as well. And as we go into the delivery, though, that will grow. So it's just making sure that we meet fortnightly. We have good conversations. We look at specific project things or wider issues. A lot of what we're providing down to the projects is a kind of city deal owned, if you like, process or procedure or template, and then we're cascading that out to the projects to try and standardize things so that when you get reports through, it's not random kind of updates. They're all in the same sort of format, providing the same level of information, if you like. So this has been really good. Phil was the last recruit. Phil, I think you start in November. But we're pretty much in the stage of where we formed as a team. We even had our Christmas party digitally, so and that worked well. So we're all doing good stuff. Everybody knows what their function is, and we're progressing very quickly on a lot of those fronts now. I'll pause there before I go into the assurance and risk register, Chair.
Yeah, I don't see any raised hands. Do you want to carry on?
Brilliant. Okay, so just to refresh your memories, the IAP, the Integrated Assurance and Approval Plan, this is effectively a timeline. What you've got here is the next 6 months or so. I know we're in February at the moment, but these are all the key governance documents or activity that we do, and anything around reviews or audits that we plan to do. So this is a snapshot. You have the full IAP in your documentation, but this is just a snapshot of where we are. So the key things coming up are our portfolio business case. We plan to submit the updated version by March, so we're making good progress on that. That is based on the next point on that screen, which is the AOR report, and those are the 15 recommendations from Welsh and UK government. There's a whole host of other things like quarterly monitoring, which you've had today. Phil touched on the annual report, the last 12 months and the future 12 months, and we had today in our programme board internal audit come in to provide the scope of what they're going to audit, and that will be underway now within the next week or so, once it's gone through joint committee. So again, a lot around assurance, approvals, etc. And just to touch on the point of all of our business cases go through an approval process. There's a 14-point process for regional approval. Then it goes through Welsh UK government approval as well. And again, that seems to be working quite well now. We've put quite a few through it. 3 business cases, as I said at the start, are with Welsh UK government for approval, ministerial approval, and they've all gone through this 14-point process. So we're making good headway with that, and there's 2 more which need to go through that process, which was skills and campuses. Okay, in terms of risk, so you got the risk register, and you should have details of risks both in the quarterly monitoring and the reports that has been provided. But we're making good progress, and we currently have 2 red risks. One is around the time frame for current EU funding programs, and I can't remember which council it was, but somebody raised it last time in how much money is WEFO reliant dependent. So we provided that electronically, but there are 2 projects: Support Innovation, Low Carbon Growth, and Pembroke Dock Marine. So if I take the first one, Support Innovation, Low Carbon Growth, this is around the Innovation Centre. They are proceeding at risk, so it's a calculated risk. They are proceeding. They've effectively started building in effect. So we've de-risked that by mitigating by proceeding at risk. And Pembroke Dock Marine, there's that now has got to a point where they can proceed and start delivering, following the funding agreements that Chris and Rich talked about earlier on, making sure that all 4 partners and the local authority down in Pembroke, all of them agree to the outputs and the deliverables and the outcomes and impact. So that is now progressing as planned. They've had to change their timelines, but it doesn't affect the ability to draw down the WEFO funding. WEFO agreed an extension with them to accommodate that. So that's the first one. The second one is about revenue funding. So this comes back to those affordability plans. So how do we make sure that all of our projects and stakeholders and everything else deliver what we plan to do in terms of investment? And again, we have quarterly monitoring now in the process. Rich is now populating the new template, and they will be reported to yourselves and to Welsh Government through our governance for Programme Board and Joint Committee. So we will go through that, and risk registers for each of the projects will be aligned to that financial monitoring. So Chair, that's the risk register and IAP. Let me go on to the next slide, and in case there's anything broadly about risk. So this is the COVID impact assessment. In the previous meeting, you asked to see the detail behind it, so you should have that now. This is a summary of that. So we have, I think it was 7 different categories across the top there. The move from October to January, there's very little movement, only 1 on timescales, and there's 1 on staff resourcing. So it's pretty much as was. There's nothing that's been thrown up to alarm us. They are risks. There are lots of things that need to be considered, but achievement of targets, reputational risk, stakeholder partnership commitment are the main concerns, and secondary to that are the impact on the scope and objectives. So they're being monitored. We're reviewing those with the project teams. Yeah, so that is pretty much the assurance and risk. So I'll pause there before going on to the projects.
Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could address the risk register and take it in conjunction with the COVID-19 impact, looking at the implementation risk, there is a clear problem of developing a sustainable supply chain. Yeah. Now, we've spoken before about the procurement process, but one of the things that has been very noticeable over the period of the pandemic is that large companies have basically refused to engage with SMEs. perhaps fearing their sustainability in the current environment, but also where large companies have procured from smaller companies, they've been very slow to pay them, and despite the prompt payment code and all the agreements with government, the practice on the ground, what I hear is that small companies are basically having their working capital used by the larger groups out there, so that in effect you're seeing, and there was an FSB survey which showed somewhere in the region of 50,000 SMEs in the UK went into insolvency because of poor payment practice by their larger clients. So one of the things that I would like to ask is an insurance that whatever agreements are made with delivery companies, that they are properly policed and enforced to ensure that as much as possible local suppliers are used and not abused in the delivery of the projects.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. In terms of the used, that is absolutely front and center to our procurement principles. So if a local contractor is unable to procure, to respond to the procurement because it's too large a scale or whatever it might be, we then would revert potentially to a tier 1 contractor, which would then utilize local supply chain, local businesses, etc. The part around, so that's in place. We all the projects are aware of that. Local authorities have to do that anyway as part of their processes. So we will continue to monitor that, and we will report on that as well. So how many local businesses have been used, how many local people have been employed, etc. The bit about the enforcement is a bit more complicated, but very much noted. I've talked to the chair of the Economic Strategy Board about this exact point, and talking about money flow within the region. This isn't just about City Deal, it's a wider thing, as you kind of pointed out. But it's making sure that that money flow happens within a timely manner. But the problem is we don't necessarily have that information to hand. Right, so it's not to say that we can't. We can try and figure that out. But again, Phil's on the call. Phil, I know you from your previous background and various other things, you might have a particular view on this, but we will put this back through our projects, and we will make sure that this is highlighted. And can we report back on it to make sure that whether we can get the information or how we can support local supply chain, local suppliers to do that, would that be acceptable?
I would certainly welcome that, if I may say so.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you. Phil, would you want to add anything to that for Ryder? You don't have to, but...
No, I think just to reiterate what you said, John, I mean, a majority of the programmes and projects are proposing to utilise the South West Wales Regional Contractors Framework for the delivery of their infrastructure elements, which obviously does bind those tier 1 contractors into the payment legislation that's already been discussed. I think the only point to add is that the actual the actual enforcement of that does stand with the lead authorities, because obviously they are the ones with the contractual obligation to ensure that the contractors delivering the work are paying their SMEs and subcontractors in a speedy manner and in accordance with the terms and conditions of the contracts that each one has individually signed up to. But that's not to say that we can't monitor and obviously report against any practices, good and bad, to ensure that those individual lead deliverers and the selected contractors are playing by the rules and ensuring that the smaller companies are getting paid in a timely manner.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. And this is an example here. It's a good question to ask, and we can now go back to our projects and get them to put this on their risk registers as a generic thing. And then the mitigation should come through the reporting to show how and what they're doing to mitigate against the potential of that happening. Okay, so we can action that. Okay. Anything else, Chair? I can't see any.
No.
We're happy to go on. So the last part of the presentation slides is basic, an update, if you like, of each of the projects and programs, the 9 of them. I'm not going to go, the detail that you have hopefully will give you a much richer feel for what's been done, what's been achieved, what they plan to do, and then things around risks, issues, and overview of the finances, but of the investment. The monitoring of finances will come a bit next quarter through Richard's quarterly monitoring, and the output deliverables that we talked about earlier on, that will also come through those quarterly reports.
I'd say we've already been provided with an update, a written update on each of the individual products. I'm sure we're going to be getting a copy of these slides after the meeting anyway. So
should we do it by exception then, Chair? If there's anything anybody would want to raise, I prefer that method anyway.
Yeah, we'll do that. I understand Councillor Llewellyn wants to come in with something, and then Councillor Price. So Councillor Llewellyn first.
Yeah, look at it. Dwi'n moving ynglyn o'r prosiectau cysylltu efo Talbot. I'd like to ask about one of the Neath Talbot schemes. I am a Neath Talbot member, so obviously, you know, I can pursue this locally, but I think it's of particular importance regionally, which is our remit as a scrutiny committee, and it's the Homes as Power Stations scheme. It's actually the largest scheme in the whole portfolio at £500 million. We take it in total, even though not all that funding obviously is coming from the city deal. We've had various updates about when this project will be approved, but it still hasn't been approved according to the report that we've got. It doesn't feature any red lines on the risk register. It's sort of all orange, but then it doesn't feature any green lines either, even though it is essentially a green type project. But now, to actually deliver that whole project across the region is going to be very, very complex. There's going to be lots of participants, lots of partners. I'm concerned, really. We're so far into the city deal period without the project having been formally approved. Pilot parts of it are proceeded. We were due to have a visit, but obviously, we can't visit locations in the current circumstances. But I'm just wondering where realistically, where are we with that project?
Yeah.
And how ready are key components of it to go once approval is given to deliver such an ambitious project over the lifetime of the city deal?
Yeah.
And just to mention as well, I mean, all the points that have been mentioned, in the last 2 minutes about the local jobs issues, using existing skills and developing new skills, plus the supply chain issues that Tony Barron was referring to, are present to a huge degree in this project. So I'd be, I think as a committee, as a whole committee, and certainly myself, I'd be looking for, some pretty concrete assurances that these aspects have been thoroughly built into the project. But I am concerned at this stage that such an ambitious project hasn't reached the formal approval stage.
There's a lot of positivity around it. So the business case itself went through external stage gate review. There was a very positive response from the external review. They actually said, get it running now, get them the money and get it right. They have no control over that, so it still had to go through the process to get it submitted to Welsh and UK government, which it now is. So Councillor, it's with Welsh UK government. It was submitted 2 weeks ago. We would expect to get feedback within the next couple of weeks. But this Homes as Power Stations, if I just refer to the number of people who would have an input to it from a government perspective, that there's probably around about 20 people that will all have an interest in this across various different parts of Welsh Government and UK Government. So we are awaiting that feedback. They have been engaged with, so positive signs came back. The project itself is going through some pilots. They're capturing all that information, so it's all information that will feed into this blueprint that they will create. Industry Wales are now engaging with the project team to look at how and what they can do to gear up towards a supply chain. But the supply chain won't be for, even though things will happen between now and a few years' time, the supply chain is planned for probably in year 3, I think it was, on the current plan. So it is a 5-year project, and Rich, I think we did agree it was a 5-year project when it went in
it was,
from
yes.
the profile.
Yes.
So they aren't in delivery specifically just yet. So your concerns are raised. They're all risks. They're issues that are being highlighted and dealt with. A project board governance group has been established. It does cover the 4 local authorities. It will be complex because there will be a lot of funding circulating around the region to look for, if you like, this blueprint of integrating all this technology in the home and then creating potential manufacturing facilities for people to start manufacturing them within the region. And one of the key things, Councillor, is the skills associated with it. So we have to make sure that all the skills requirements are in place and that we have a skilled workforce that can actually deliver some of these things that we're talking about through supply chains as well. So if this project was in delivery, I would probably share your concerns more, but because it is only just been submitted as an outline business case and the stuff that they're working on currently is informing or will inform the project, I'm relatively comfortable. And the last thing I want to touch on is often projects might fail because they're not resourced appropriately. So what we have agreed in principle is that Homes as Power Stations as a regional project can start recruiting their project manager and team at risk while the decision to invest is going through the governments. And that's a local authority decision across the 4 local authorities that they can proceed with that. So we're trying to mitigate as many of those things as we can. You pointed at the exact thing is the supply chain. And Industry Wales are having really good dialogue with the team to try and figure out how and what can happen for that. Before I finish, Councillor, Rich, would you like to add anything to that based on what we've talked about in the preceding months?
No, I was just going to point out that there is a partial recruitment option on the management team, because at the moment the business case as was done and delivered just by Neath for Talbot. So within that, the city deal, there is funding for a project management team which will support the delivery of this and engage with all the RSLs and private sector partners as well to generate the project and deliver the project.
Councillor Llewellyn, you want to come back?
Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful for the information. I'm sure Jonathan and Richard will forgive me for remaining a bit nervous and inquisitive about this until we know that we're well underway. It's just the huge complications and implications of this scheme. But thanks for the update.
Councillor, we'll continue to unfold this as it happens with all the information that you have, and we can bring in the project lead if you would like, and we can have conversations around some of these concerns if you would like in the near future.
Well, Jonathan, I think it's anticipated that the committee wants to look at Homes as Power Stations specifically next meeting, which I think is scheduled for May. So around that time, I'm sure we'll have more meat on the bones and we'll be able to digest them more.
I think it's perfect timing, Chair. Yeah,
that's great. Councillor Price.
Diolch Cadeirydd. Mae 2 gwestiwn da fi ar y prosiectau ranbarthol. So I've got 2 questions in terms of the regional projects. The first one is something that crops up on the risk register in the pack for the agenda today. It relates to the Skills and Talent project. And there's mention there of the fact that the delay in that programme could impact on the delivery of the skills required by approved project. And it talks of the risk that
individual schemes, projects might be taking on that role, leading to duplication. So I suppose there's a couple of questions really on that front. You know, clearly the delay is problematic in that sense, but the wider concern, I suppose, is that when we first set out on this journey some years ago, we were told that the skills and talent element was pivotal and that we needed to get ahead of the game, you know, in terms of creating these people through the education system to take advantage of the jobs. Well, when we looked at the summary earlier on of the 2 projects that are still in development stage, skills and talent was one of them, you know, so that to me is not quite jumping ahead of the game, you know. So I'd be grateful if you could just maybe talk to that a little, because clearly that's a concern for me personally, and I'm sure others would concur. And the second element then, which jumped out, was with regards to another regional project, the digital infrastructure, and there's a risk element there around state aid issues, and the fact that the obviously recently agreed Brexit deal now brings with it a lack of clarity in terms of public sector telecoms investment. I know you've mentioned there that you've got some legal advice externally, and I think you're getting advice as well from UK and Welsh governments. Could you just provide an update really in terms of where we are with that, and specifically what the challenges are and how that impacts on the project? Diolch.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. I'll pick up skills first. So I share your concerns and others if they have it. I think that skills could or should have been one of the first. It's not. We can't undo that. But what we are doing now is fast tracking what we need to do. So and to relay some of the concerns around it, which I've had my concerns relayed on some of these things as well. So we now will be recruiting at risk again for this regional project to get a project manager and potentially part of a team in post sooner rather than later, so we can get that transition from a development of business case into delivery. The other part of it then is that skills development across the region, so through the RLSP, the Regional Learning Skills Partnership, that will continue. So that doesn't preclude all that good work happening where they identify skills gaps, they build on the existing programs and apprenticeships and all those different things that happen. So that will contribute towards City Deal anyway and the region, right? So all that will happen. What the skills and talent program specifically will look at is new. So it can't build on what's already there. It will create new, and we have to identify what those opportunities are with the project leads and the businesses that we engage with, etc. So and the providers, particularly for the region and beyond. So we're doing that now. An exercise has happened to engage with all the projects to identify what their skills needs are. That's recently been undertaken by some external consultants that have been recruited. We're also looking at the economic appraisal for skills. So we had a meeting with a Welsh Government consultant last week to make sure that we're shaping our business case to get it over the line as quickly as we can, but as robustly as we can. And that was a really good conversation last week. We have our project lead who is currently Jane. She works for the RLSP. She is now focused on this and supported by one of my team. So Ian, who used to work for Neath with Talbot, he's come across onto the City Deal, and he is looking at shaping and writing the narrative on that business case with Jane. So we're putting resource into it to get it accelerated. We're using advisors to make it more robust. And we're also doing that consultation with the provider. There's a subgroup called a providers group for the RLSP, and also, as I said, the project leads. So we're moving forward on it. It's not going as quick as I like it to, but we are going in the right direction, and we hope by best estimate, I would say by May, to start going through our regional approval process. So we can't change that we're behind on it, but we're trying to accelerate as quickly as we can, Councillor. Anything you would like to come back on any of those points that I raised before I go into digital?
Yeah, no, that's fine, thank you.
Okay. In terms of digital, Rich, you might want to pick up the state aid specific, but digital infrastructure is now with Welsh and UK government, as I said previously. The feedback both from Welsh government, particularly what they call the PSBA, That's the body that does the kind of infrastructure, if you like, for Wales. The feedback's been positive. The alignment is there. We have a series of questions that we just had a meeting with UK government, sorry, last week, and a comprehensive response to the 18 questions I think there were. So that is now back with the government, and hopefully we'll get a decision to invest in coming weeks based around that. But it does show that there's alignment and that it's affordable. The whole premise of digital infrastructure is similar for all the other City Deal projects. It's a catalyst. It's not the only thing that will come in. And the whole point about trying to attract further funding from the public sector or private sector is critical to actually get both the rural and the urban or the town localities across the region better, more reliable, faster connectivity. And again, similar to Skills Councillor, it's the kind of foundations, if you like, to overlay then other things on top of it to bring those skilled workforce into the region, to attract businesses to the area. So that is, as for me, is as critical as skills in that sense. Rich, do you want to touch on the state aid rather than me fumble through a response? I've got a response, but you might have a better, more robust.
I'm not too au fait with the state aid side of it, to be truthful to you. So I can speak to Gareth and get you a formal response. But I think essentially what there's a risk there of is that the idea of the digital is to stimulate the private sector investment. So essentially, it's to lay the groundworks down first. So then it will bring on board the private sector investment from the telecommunications and connectivity companies. So I think what it's just trying to address there, in simple terms, and again, I can get back to you with some further detail on this, is that it doesn't want to be seen as too heavily reliant on government and central, because government are awarding a lot of grants centrally to try and stimulate interconnectivity and infrastructure in rural areas. So it's kind of going down that route. As not to be, it doesn't want to be too heavily reliant on that public sector, whether it not be City Deal but other government grants as well, and also to stimulate the private sector aspect with the big providers.
And the only bit I'd probably add, and again, Gareth Jones is our digital project lead, very good. We'll get it confirmed from Gareth, but if you think of, as Rich said, there's lots of public funds gone into fibre, as an example, the pipeline that provides us our wonderful connections. If that has been subsidised by public funds, how private companies can piggyback on that, there's a question on some of those things. So that is more of a state aid thing, particularly around Welsh Government, around PSBA. But we'll get the detail behind that. It's in the business case, but rather than me give a kind of potched response, as Rich said, we'll provide that in a kind of narrative so that it's easy to understand, and we can spell out abbreviations like PSBA and various other things for you, so you get what all those things are. But with digital infrastructure, it does cover the three kind of aspects of the more urban city centre, the rural type and towns and the rural areas, and then also the wireless connectivity. So whether that is 5G or whatever other technologies that exist, those three things will form part of the programme, and each one of those will go through procurement, which will hopefully attract private industry as part of that process.
Councillor Price, do you want to come?
Thank you very much for that. And as I say, in terms of the project, I think we all agree that it's a fundamental, really, in terms of the overall City Deal. It was the core selling point, really, wasn't it, initially? But I suppose the reason I raised it is because in the risk description, it actually refers to following the recent Brexit deal. And so my question is, I suppose, what's changed? Because surely, as part of the single market, as a fully fledged EU member, we would have been subject to those restrictions anyway. So I'm just that's the bit I was a bit confused about.
We'll get clarity on that just to make sure. It might have been the same thing, but just couched in a different way.
Yeah.
Anything else on this? No, that's great. Okay. There we are. So
Chair, do you mind me? There were a couple of outstanding actions, and I just wanted to make sure. So the WEFA one, which you've had, Tony, you raised before about our assumptions. Could I have 2 minutes just the assumptions based on the portfolio? Do you remember that was one of the debates, one of the questions, and I said I would come back to you. I don't know if you recall, it was probably in October, I think it was, but what we've managed to do, so we've now got every project bar 2 with all the assumptions that we've got based on them. And what I'll just share my screen very, very quickly, Chair, if you don't mind. This is just to give you a feel. We'll give you the final product, if you like, once we've produced it. But for now, I'll just share with you as a group. So each project has a number of headline things that they will do. You can all see this, I assume. The assumptions based on them, and what are those assumptions based on when they were reviewed, the current status, and any comments. And we got those for each of the projects. But effectively, I'll stop presenting. That's an example of, that's Pentra Owl. But effectively, the assumptions that were talked about before, they're all based around time, cost, or funding, the investment, quality, impact, and then there's a few other kind of stragglers around. But those 4 categories are effectively what the assumptions are based on. So I just want to make sure that we close the loop on, you've asked for something, we're almost there, we're not quite, because 2 business cases aren't quite there in terms of articulating them. But it's been a really good exercise, and we'll incorporate that back into our portfolio business case as well, so that they're clearly articulated. So I just wanted to update the members on that, Chair.
Okay, that's great, thanks. Do you want to come back in, Councillor Barronto?
No, I appreciate that you've done the work and that you'll be coming back with all of the projects. I think that would be very instructive and informative for everyone.
Okay. Right. There we are. So we'll move on to the last item then on the agenda. Thank you very much for the presentation and answering the questions, Jonathan. So forward work programme. Prior to this meeting, there was discussions within the committee that they felt that three updates of the regional projects, i.e. digital infrastructure, skills and talents, and homes as power stations, to be scheduled on the 25th of May was a bit too much, especially as it's likely to be on Microsoft Teams. Can I have a recommendation in terms of how we proceed with this?
Chair, I propose that we take 1 regional project at a time to give us the time to delve into it at the depth that's required, and maybe starting with the homes as power stations.
Okay, so from that then, there's been a suggestion that homes as power station be on the agenda for the next meeting, and then we'll take skills and talents and then digital infrastructure. Can I have a support of that? Councillor Morgan, do you want to come in?
Yes, sorry, just briefly, Chair, following on from the kind update that Jonathan gave us, I just wonder whether, as part of our quarterly meetings, we should have a heading of GVA and jobs creation updates specific just for that topic, so that we can see clearly the figures and within their own rights, because I think it's pretty important really for the overall project. We can't get higher figures than what we're trying to achieve with these, so I propose that it becomes a subheading.
Yeah, I agree.
So this would be a head of action plan. You would like GVA and GTP outputs under the program monitoring coordinator?
Yes, anywhere in there will do, Chair, but just looking specifically to have its own profile. Jonathan?
I totally support that, Councillor. I think the just to make sure that we're all aligned with the terminology, the impact related things are unlikely to change. They will probably change on the portfolio business case refresh, which is annual. What we're probably talking about here is you can call it wherever, deliverables or benefits realization or that type of stuff, which shows the progress and delivery of, because the stuff that we're talking about with the impact would be through an evaluation, which is a more potentially macro thing that would be less frequent. So they can dovetail, but at the right time. But you're talking about the evaluation stuff being a lot further down the line than the updates on deliverables. Does that make sense?
Councillor Morgan?
Yeah, no, just to come back. Yeah, as I said in my piece earlier, GVA is further down the line, but as a scrutiny committee, you can't, as you'll agree yourself, Jonathan, GVA is no nominal figures, they're notional. There's something that you're saying is going to happen, but as a scrutiny committee, we can't just allow those figures to go unchallenged. So somewhere along the line, that GVA has got to come out somewhere, and I fully appreciate that it might not be in the short term. So, we're just having a minor argument here about a title. The fact of the matter is, I want to see the deliverables with its own heading. You can call it what you like, but I will keep on coming back to GVA every 6 months, a year. We can't have nothing going forward, even on GVA. So somewhere along the line, there's going to be updates for that. I appreciate that'll be further down the line. But certainly, jobs and any other deliverables need to be coming to us as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
Okay, there's 2 recommendations. Can I have a show of hands for everyone in agreement of that? That's great. Don't see anyone against that proposal. Fantastic. Okay, so that is the meeting closed then. I don't have any items under urgent items, so I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all for your attendance, and I shall be seeing you soon. Take care all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Jonathan.